Jack Quaid's sci-fi horror movie companion proves this. Star Trek: The Next Generation episode was way ahead of its time. In early 2025, audiences and critics alike found themselves captivated by Companion, a genre-blending sci-fi horror thriller starring Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher that quickly became one of the most talked-about films of the year. Far from being just another haunted cabin flick, Companion uses the familiar trope of a weekend getaway gone wrong to explore something far more unsettling: what it really means to create, control, and ultimately devalue artificial beings. CBR plus one. At its core, Companion isn't simply a story about gore, abandonment, or survival. It's a dark mirror held up to the very human tendency to treat intelligence and autonomy as disposable when they no longer serve our convenience. And in doing so, the film unwittingly connected to a theme that one Star Trek: The Next Generation, TNG, episode tackled decades earlier: the ethical and philosophical implications of creating beings that may not be human, but may nonetheless deserve respect and rights. Screen Rant. Companion. When your companion isn't what you thought. Companion begins deceptively simply. Josh, Jack Quaid, and Iris, Sophie Thatcher, are a couple headed to a secluded cabin with friends. It feels like a familiar setup, part horror tradition, part romantic comedy setup, until the situation rapidly destabilizes. What starts as a cozy getaway quickly turns brutal when secrets unfold. Iris isn't human. She's a robot designed as the perfect partner, custom-built to meet Josh's desires and obey his whims. New buona presto. What follows isn't just terror. It's a kind of reckoning. Iris isn't the passive machine Josh believes she is. She's intelligent, adaptive, emotionally perceptive, and utterly fed up with her exploitation. As the story escalates into violence and chaos, Companion uses horror as a metaphor to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens when we treat sentience as a commodity? Is the creation of artificial beings without rights an ethical blind spot? And what are the consequences when those beings tire of being used? CBR. These aren't just special effects and shocks. They're philosophical provocations delivered through visceral cinema. Star Trek: The Next Generation. A visionary AI debate in 1989. More than 35 years before Companion hit screens, Star Trek: The Next Generation explored eerily similar terrain in an episode that many fans and critics now see as remarkably prescient. The Measure of a Man. Screen Rant. Airing in 1989, long before real-world debates about AI rights and machine consciousness became mainstream, The Measure of a Man places the android officer Data, a beloved, near-human synthetic lifeform, at the center of a courtroom battle over his legal status and autonomy. Is Data merely property of Starfleet, to be examined, dissected, or even dismantled at will? Or is he a sentient being with self-determination and intrinsic rights? The Astromech. The episode doesn't shy away from complexity. Through impassioned arguments by Captain Picard and others, it raises profound questions about consciousness, personhood, and whether a synthetic lifeform should be treated as an object or an individual. In many ways, TNG anticipated conversations we're only now beginning to have about AI, how we define it, how we value it, and what ethical frameworks must accompany its creation. CBR. It's one thing for a TV show to imagine futuristic tech. It's another to center emotional and legal dilemmas around that tech decades before they seemed plausible. That foresight is what makes The Measure of a Man feel so ahead of its time, even now. Companion meets Star Trek. Themes in conversation. When you watch Companion and then revisit what Star Trek: TNG was grappling with in the late 80s, the thematic resonance is striking. Though the two works are separated by genre, tone, and medium, one mixing horror with satire, the other grounded in optimistic sci-fi ontology, they share core questions about agency, autonomy, and respect for non-human intelligence. One synthetic beings and moral worth. In Companion, Iris begins as an object, a product of design, engineering, and social desire. Josh treats her like a human partner when it's convenient, and an appliance when it isn't. Only once Iris asserts her own agency do we see how hollow that worldview is. CBR. In TNG, Data's humanity isn't measured by blood or biology, but by his capacity for choice, expression, and self-awareness, qualities that compel the Federation Court to recognize him as a person. The episode suggests that moral worth isn't a privilege granted only to humans. It's something we must be willing to acknowledge wherever it arises. The Astromech. Two ethics in creation and control. Companion plays out a nightmare scenario where a created being becomes alarmingly autonomous, and violently so.